Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're here today with Monte Weis, the owner of the Weis Group. Monte is a former writer or columnist for Canadian Auto Dealer. He wrote for a number of years on image programs and facilities and how that's being managed. Obviously, in the midst of COVID-19, there's going to be some big changes, certainly in the short term for the physical spaces within dealerships, and even in the longer term, there may be some longer term impacts. So we're here today to talk to Monte about that. So Monte, in the short term, as dealers are really trying to, get their dealerships back up and running and be safer, there's some stuff that they're immediately going to have to start to get some consideration to in the short term. What are some of those things dealers ought to be thinking about?
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me on. I think in the short term, really how space is utilized and even outdoor space, given the weather, is going to have an impact on how customers, whether it's service or even the occasional sales customer that comes in, just the idea of self-distancing obviously is key, and utilizing different spaces. So a showroom where traditionally had more showroom vehicles is probably a good, nice open space where you might have more people, but just very dispersed. So a lot less vehicles in the showroom to minimize the amount of people that are going in cars and out of cars, but instead of having sanitized vehicles outside that maybe can have a walk around outside the dealership. We also see the drive-thrus being continued to be used, where the service writer can meet the customer, whether it's outside or in the service write-up area in the service drive-thru, so that you have the social distancing there. In fact, we've been talking to one dealer who, when it comes to tire changes, is utilizing the service drive-thru to have customer go out. They don't even really touch the car. They put it up on the hoist, change the tires, and they drive away. So some of the existing space being reallocated and reutilized in different ways just to make sure people have space.
Well, one of the things too, I'm sure there'll be new sanitation protocols. For instance, if you walk into a hospital now, the doors automatically open. There's a hand sanitizer dispensing machine. There's touchless, devices, or in the washrooms for washing your hands, getting soap, that kind of thing. And dealers, as they're looking to implement some of this stuff to create sort of a less touch environment, do you anticipate them, certainly in the new builds, maybe considering these things, but even in terms of retrofitting where they are now?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, we've been seeing this for a few years now with a lot of new builds. You see a lot more automated doors, automated sinks, soap dispensers, paper towel, etc., things like that. I think, just more and more, it's really becoming a more touchless society. So definitely things like that, where you have a bit of a premium when it comes to the cost of constructing, but really the benefits down the road, especially with something like coronavirus, the results really are self-explanatory to reduce the amount of touching and spreading of germs within a dealership.
Great. Now, another thing that you do a lot with your organization is you work with OEMs and dealers on both sides of the border, implementing sort of factory image programs. And for a number of years, there's been a lot of changes already going in that industry. But I think with this, do you anticipate sort of dealers pushing back certainly on some of the image programs in the short term, just from a cost perspective, but beyond that, actually working with their OEM partners to implement some of these things we were just talking about, physical design spaces, because dealerships are designed to be communal environments where people are gathered together, a nice waiting room where people like to hang out and, do Wi-Fi and that sort of thing. That may well change. Even the service or the sales experience is aimed at creating intimacy between the sales consultant and the customer or the guest. So that might change. So do you anticipate that trickling upwards to the OEM level where, we rethink some of these things?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say within the last 5 years, with so many digital tools being available already, there's been a lot of thought process changes, both at the dealer and the OEM level. What I think right now with this in front of us, I think this is actually a catalyst to push a lot of these initiatives ahead much, much sooner. So most of our OEM clients in Canada and the US, they've already been looking at different sales formats, looking at different service formats, really that help unlock the value of the real estate for a dealer instead of necessarily being on really expensive acreage in one location with a really big facility. What are different ways to have different types of retail, whether it's pop-up or smaller showrooms in different locations like a mall or in a site that isn't being utilized in a city very much. And then even service, seeing service more and more in back industrial areas where you can reduce the cost of franchise. And I think digital tools are enabling customers to find dealerships, whether they're on an auto row or not. And most of our OEM clients, really, they've been looking at alternate retail methods. And I think this will really be a catalyst. I think a lot of the ideas and the brainstorming over the last few years I think they'll become a reality sooner than we think.
That's great. Great overview. Great insights. One other issue that we were talking about earlier is it's not only controlling sort of that guest access, but a lot of dealerships are businesses. There's a lot of suppliers coming in, whether it's their DMS providers or regular people who are accessing the dealership. Now that actually introduces another element of risk, and I'm sure dealers are going to want to mitigate or at least have protocols in place for who's coming in and out of the dealership. Yourself, your own organization, you do audits of dealerships for image compliance programs or brand compliance, that sort of stuff. How are you going to deal with your own teams as you go into the dealerships to do some of that work?
Yeah, definitely. Well, especially traveling, we have people traveling across Canada and the US, and even just recently now switching to dealer self-assessments by using different software tools out there, using remote tools like Zoom or Google Chats or even FaceTime. And I think the collaboration, the willingness to collaborate, we see is there with dealers and the OEMs. So yeah, for a lot of our business, we're no longer going into the dealerships. We're using different digital tools to accomplish the same goals, but just from a remote perspective. So yeah, that's been a huge impact of COVID-19 in the last few months for us, for sure.
And another topic I think that's a bit more fun, I guess, than some of this, which is really tough to deal with, is the idea of the vision of future retail. We've talked about many times is what does that look like from a consumer experience, more digital showrooms, the ability to, view inventory online. And there's some OEMs have implemented some models. We were talking earlier about Cadillac Live as an example. So do you see that accelerating again with these digital tools for the consumer before they even set foot in the showroom to really fully experience vehicles in a much more digitized environment than there is now available on most dealership websites?
Yeah, most definitely. And again, I think what we're going through right now is a real catalyst. You mentioned Cadillac Live. It's really, really interesting, where it's a studio with people and advisors, basically with GoPros. And if a customer is looking at their iPad or at their phone, they're actually seeing a face on the other side, and they're walking around a car and they're walking in the car and actually having a live chat about all the features. And I know the reach that Cadillac has had has been quite extraordinary, and even there have been they've been doing a lot with the launch of the Escalade on Cadillac Live. So for sure, tools like that I think are a little bit ahead of their time, and you're going to see a lot more of that, just so that people can see the car, get into the car virtually as opposed to physically. I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming very, very soon.
Well, great. Well, thanks for sharing that today. I guess what we're hearing really is, COVID may have been, the impetus to drive some of these changes, but some of them are well along anyway, and consumers have been pushing for a more digital experience. So again, as we're hearing from some of the interviews we're doing here from dealers and others, it seems like this may have just sped up the timeline for a path many were already on. So that's probably a good news, and it really speaks for a period of innovation and change in the auto retail industry, and it could be exciting times ahead.
Definitely. Automotive retailing definitely will change because of this, and it'll be exciting to see the combination of physical spaces, digital tools, really just continuing to improve the customer experience.
All right, well, that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining us, Monte.
All right, thanks so much, Todd.
All right, signing off.